Hi. Okay, so this is my first, I don't know, can I call it an episode of Lindy Lou's book reviews? Oh my gosh, I just totally made that up and I spit when I said it. Did you see that? Okay. Well, whatever. That's just how my life goes. So we're going to continue on. A couple of years ago, I was in a book club and we read The Orphan Train. It was a historical fiction book, and ever since I read The Orphan Train, I have been in love with historical fiction. It's not for everyone, but it's something that I really enjoy. And it's funny because I just tend to gravitate when I go to the library for those kinds of books. And so unintentionally, I have a pile here of some historical fiction that I want to share with you. And the first book I'm going to talk to you about is written by Lisa Wingate, and it's called Before We Were Yours. Now, when I first heard of this book, I was actually reading another book by Lisa Wingate. It was last month. She co-wrote a book, I can't remember the lady's name, and I didn't know about this book until I read that book. And so what this is a book about Before We Were Yours, and it's based on true facts about the Tennessee Children's Home Society in Tennessee back in the 30s to the 50s. And this woman, not a very nice woman, her name is Georgia Tann, and she was the director of this organization. And basically, she would steal children and give them to wealthy families, and she earned a ton of money doing it. Like, she would have been a multi-millionaire in our day and age, like if the currency was, if you're comparing currency. But this book is based on a family whose they lived on a riverboat, and there were 5 kids, and the mom went into labor, and these kids were alone on their houseboat. Their dad had to take take his wife to the hospital, and while they were in the hospital, police came because this Georgia Tann lady was in bed basically with the government and the police. She would give them kickbacks on the children that they brought to her. And so the story of Before We Were Yours is a historical fiction book based on this family where they were taken to her orphanage and they were separated. And then as time, continues on, some of the sisters found each other. And it was a really, really great book. But what happened was, when this book was published, people started reading it, and they started reading about the Tennessee Children's Home Society, and they started realizing that they were actually a part of this, that they were adopted through this home. And so they started to reach out to Lisa Wingate, and they're like, I think this story, did you write this story about me? And so all of these pieces and parts started to come together, and she started to collect all of these stories from these survivors of this Georgia Tann and this horrible condition that she put these kids in. Like, some 500, at least that they know of, children were died because if they weren't like a pretty baby, or if they had health issues or they weren't strong, they would just leave them in a crib until they died. And so the book that I read before I actually found and read this one was a collection of the stories from true survivors of this Tennessee Children's Home Society. And so, of course, after I read all of the horrifying stories and things that these kids had gone through and survived, and some of them had, because this happened so long ago, some of them have been dead for years, but it's their children and their grandchildren who were piecing together the parts of this story. So I had to come back and read the novel, and I highly, highly, highly recommend this. I'm actually now reading another book by Lisa Wingate. It's a novel about some ladies who get stuck in a hurricane, but it's really good. But I definitely recommend reading Before We Were Yours, and then the part, I can't remember the name of but you can find it at your local library. And it is the collection of the stories of the survivors of this Georgia Tann and the Tennessee Children's Home Society. And it's very sad that things like this happened. And, as I previously mentioned, The Orphan Train, I would highly recommend that you read that too. But yeah, so anyway, Before We Were Yours by Lisa Wingate. Pick it up, you guys. Seriously, great book.